Hello, and welcome back to another one of these videos, this time good and evil in the perspective of a teenager. So I'm gonna go with another semi-simplistic topic, which is good and evil. I originally was going to refer to this and the video as good versus evil, but that didn't really fit the dynamic of what this series is supposed to be. So when it comes down to it, we've all seen it. I'm gonna show it up on screen now. We've all seen the symbol, we all know what it's called, but it does tell an interesting story. So when it comes down to it, this symbol has a lot of meanings, and it's just so whitewashed with so many different variations of the same thing. It's just a universal symbol at this point. I'm just going to give you the basic description for those of you who don't know or don't fully understand it. The white in the symbol is good. The black in the symbol is bad. The small dots in each of the two parts represents the dynamic between the two, as in there is some good and bad and some bad and good. And those together create an equilibrium, which is referred to as life, quote unquote, I guess. So then I started to think, how could this be applied to modern society, modern ethics, and I spent the last couple of days, ever since I recorded the first video, and I've come to a kind of terrifying conclusion. So the way I first started this pondering was thinking, why are bad things happening? Why are bad people bad? You know, it's something a lot of us think about, like, oh my god, my life sucks. Why is this happening to me? Why is everything so bad? Well, to start, if this symbol exists and is so universal, it has to mean something. It means that the dynamic between good and bad is important in some way. Keep in mind, if this sounds very surface level, that's because I decided to look at this from a clean slate. So, bad. Of course, no one really likes the idea of something bad happening. No one wants to be around a bad person. No one wants to live in a bad society. No one wants bad ethics. That's from the standpoint of being good. But then why is there such an arbitrary amount of bad in the world, bad in life? And I've kind of just sat on this and I never really came to a conclusion. It just seems like there's bad things for the sake of there being bad things. So as a side note, I really like studying psychology on my free time because it is extremely fascinating, and for me at least, it created a moral dilemma because the more I learned about how humans behave and how humans function, the more it changed my perception on life and the human species as a whole. So I was thinking, if there's such a dynamic, at least that we perceive as good and bad, then human psychology might actually lead to some answers. And I got some answers. I don't know if they answered the dilemma of why there's so much bad, but it seems to be at an equilibrium. So, as far as I could tell, it seems that people who do bad things, such as serial killers and whatnot, they seem to do things, but in their eyes, everyone else is bad. And when I found this out, this created such an existential dilemma with myself. It made me realize, if the people who do horrendous things think that they're the ones in the good side, in the good position, then it almost creates a paradox, because if everyone thinks they're good, they could be doing bad. And it also made me think the societal norms and the ethics that we've come to know based on what is expected of us in modern society. It makes me think, how truly good is it? How good am I actually? Have I just been deceived into something that is horrible, but it is actually good? Or have I been deceived into doing something that we think is good, but is actually horrible? There's been a standard set for us, and we just kind of roll with it. We don't necessarily question what is good or bad. We have a set of guidelines that we all seem to just be following on the premise that it's good. So then it really begs the question of, how do we really know what is truly good and what is truly bad? It seems to be based off of current events in the world and what seems to be morally right and morally beneficial based off of scientific fact. And that's what it seems to be. All this is, just like the perception of time, is just that, perception. We're only perceiving what is good and evil. Right now, we all could be believing that we're doing good in the world, or we're good people, and we are horrendous people. Right now, especially just before this voiceover, I started thinking very existentially, in that, for me at least, I have this underlying feeling that I'm just a decent, good person. When I apply this idea to it, it makes me really question, am I that good of a person? Am I actually as nice or as kind as I think I am. I like to believe I am. That's just the way my brain functions. I'd like to believe I'm a nice person. Am I a nice person? I don't know anymore. And I don't want to be all existential complaining right now, but there really is no way to tell if something is good or evil. No matter what you try to justify, there's no concrete amount of good or evil you can apply to it. And it all comes full circle back to the yin and yang, because there's such a strange equilibrium when it comes to this symbol. And it makes more sense when you actually think about it in the full scope of there is some bad and good and bad. Because as far as I know it, I'm a good person. That's just what my brain likes to make me think. However, I could be doing bad things, but since my brain has forced me under this perception that I'm good, I could be doing bad things going off of the premise that they're good. Which is why I think that the yin and yang, the idea of it at least, is entirely a human perception. Just like time is merely a perception. So at this point, for me at least, and I'm assuming anyone else that has thought about this and tried to apply it to their everyday life, it may cause some confusion. Like, we hear all this bad stuff about the media, but what about the good they've done? Even though we cloak the media as this bad thing, we cloak literally everything is bad at this point because of how much deception is going on in the recent fake news debacle and all that shenanigans. If we're to apply yin and yang to this, there has to be some good in the media. And obviously that would be true. There's so many people that work in the field and the industry. Not everyone is a horrible person. And same with things that are good. Just like with video games. Recently, there's been a huge issue with AAA games and AAA developers. We were all going off the premise, oh, look at these developers, they're so good, they're making these high quality games, and this and that. But hidden, shrouded in the middle of all that goodness, was the greed, the what we perceive as evil, because of all the microtransactions in these games. Again, it's a strange dynamic. Of course, as a teenager, this is going to be strange to apply. Just thinking about how, when I'm an adult, how would I apply this? Because if it's merely a perception what is good and bad, then I could go haywire at any minute. You'll hear about a lot of mass shootings and whatnot, and you'll hear how their relatives will say they seemed perfectly fine. There was no issue with them, there's no mental health issues in their medical history, but then they just went apeshit and decided, oh, let me just get a couple guns and just kill a few hundred people. So I know that I mentioned a lot, and even in the previous video, society, ethics, all this and that, but when I'm integrated into society fully as an adult, so let's say that the economy isn't exactly stable, what if I have to work my ass off to get the money that I need to live? What if I overstress myself and then I snap? My perception of good changes. What if I'm the next person that the media covers as this crazy person that did this bad thing? So as I've thought and pondered on this subject, I've gone through multiple existential dilemmas just because of the fact that it's merely perception. And that alone made me realize just now in this voiceover, the internet. The reason you'll hear so often two people arguing and they both think that they're right, or there's so much toxicity, is just that. They think that they're right. They're perceiving that they're right when they truly aren't. And that also explains, ironically, black and white divides. You'll hear about two groups that split up, or they were split up from the start, and their only objective is to ruin the other side. That is a very bare bones description of a black and white divide between groups. But that's because they're perceiving each other as the good side. History is written by the people who won the wars. And when we apply this dynamic, it also brings into question things in history. How much of it is fake? How much of it is bullshit that was written by the side that won to embellish themselves so people like us will think that they're the good guys? Everything that I think about that I can apply this to, it makes me think of it in a completely different way. I don't see wars the same way anymore. I don't necessarily see society the same way anymore. I don't see myself the same way. I don't see laws the same way. And for those of you that have already thought about this topic and have already pondered it, put in the comments, what have you applied yin and yang to? Not only am I kind of freaked the fuck out at this idea that we don't necessarily truly know what is good and bad, but I'm also fascinated by it at the same time. So for those of you that have never thought this before, and now you're maybe thinking about it, or you're applying some of my ideas to your beliefs, tell me what you think about it as well, because I've only really thought about this in the last couple of days. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Even though it's such a simplistic topic, once you really think about it, there's a lot of mental barriers that are passed by doing so. So yeah, that was good and evil in the perspective of a teen. Bye.